Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Suman Kanuganti here, who has already been on the show, and he is the CEO and co-founder of Personal.ai. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you again, Stuart.
Yeah. So what's new in terms of so last time we talked, we were talking about large language models, and then there are other types of language models, and one of which is a personal language model. So
hmm
what's new in the realm of having a language model trained on a person who might not show up in a place like Wikipedia or other places?
Yeah, so the concept of personal language model is still the same, and now it's being applied to uh, the AI workforce concept, right? Um,
Hmm.
we spoke during our consumer times when the company was direct to consumer, and then we were creating like PLMs for anybody and everybody. What we found was from a purely business perspective that did not work. There is a mismatch on us pushing a sophisticated PLM down through the throats of consumers where they are mostly worried about, grocery lists and the shopping, right? So, I come from the background of compliance in the B2B
Hmm.
spaces. So I essentially, in late 2023, pivoted in our GTM into using the PLMs to create the domain expertise and create specialized models in the concept of AI workforce for the companies. And that has proven out to be, greater impact that we were able to make. And today, there are large enterprises who are choosing personal AI for creating their AI workforce and pushing the percentage of AI workforce to their human workforce. So
Hmm.
yeah, so in short, the PLMs are that programmable piece to the LLMs that was missing, and the use case is more tailored towards the AI workforce.
That's really interesting. There's a lot of thoughts there. The ones coming out because I had interviewed your CTO as well, and it was really interesting to go into the technical details of a PLM and how much of that was then applicable to the business market, the B2B.
Yeah, so 100% of it is applicable to the business
Cool.
market.
Uh-huh.
So what we found was within the business market, specifically when you are training on the proprietary data, that data is already unavailable. It's not available, if you will, in the large language models, right? And they
Mm,
needed high
mm.
privacy, they needed high context, they needed high depth. All that is what the characteristics of personal AI was. And if you do remember from Sharon's conversation, every PLM has its own memory and its own sets of like
Yeah,
mixture of
interesting.
experts. You may have seen the DeepSeek architecture that has come up recently, right? So PLM kind of mimics or similar to the mixture of expert concept from the DeepSeek, except that we do not pre-train those models with presets of data.
Well,
We use that architecture to train individual centered, data, if you will. Today, it could be employee based. Like for example, Stewart can have Stewart AI, with as a member
hmm.
in your collaboration for your workspace, or you could have a completely virtual employee, if you will, that could be that doesn't have to be associated with an existing human being, if you will.
Okay, that's really interesting. I love it because it's the same thing, but it's
Yep,
inside of an organization
correct.
because I have my role, I do the role, and so it's almost like the next level of automation because
That's right.
it's yeah, okay, interesting. And how does it fit in? Does it fit in with the old school automations of like Zapier and other things?
So that layer of infrastructure, as you know, is evolving into more agents, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what I see is happening is within the enterprise as well as within the non-enterprise world, there are models. So you have the LLMs now. There are a handful of them these days. And our focus has always been the PLMs, which is more tailored towards capturing the essence of an individual, a specialized expert, a domain expert into an entity called, we call them personas, if you remember that. So the persona kind of captures the, um, uh, a role, right? That's kind of how we think about it. So I kind of lost my thought. You were
So yeah,
talking about.
we got persona captures the role, and then how does it lead into the layer of infrastructure? We have
Right,
agents
right,
to
right.
do
The
that.
agents. So, so if you think about the models, there are external models that knows external knowledge, and then you have internal knowledge, which is internal
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
right? That's how we
yeah,
structure with the personas.
yeah. Interesting.
Now, there is automation that is kind of built on top of these models. Now, sometimes the model used could be external models, such as a Perplexity, but then I would want an opinion from the internal, which is like Steward AI, right? The decision making engines.
Mm,
And then you have this agentic layer. So right now, the agentic layer is kind of a hybrid of like Zapier and A10, but there is like native agents that are, you know, being evolved and people are working on it, where the idea of the authorization kind of happens one time. So within the personal AI ecosystem, the way we are thinking about it is, you have multiple personas working with each other, but at times you may have to send an email, and that's when you invoke
yeah,
an
interesting.
agent
Yeah.
that is authorized for on your behalf to send an email out. And that's like a very simplistic example, but you can think about multiple different agents that carry the information from one persona to the other persona.
Yeah, very interesting. So do you imagine, philosophically, where are we headed with this in terms of business? I actually was asking this question online earlier, is like, what does a business turn into? Because right now we have startups that want to become a monopoly, and then
Hmm.
they become a monopoly, but things change.
Hmm.
And so then all of a sudden, then you have the new startups that can come and kind of pick at the old monopolies, as long as they're not sort of government mandated. And so a lot of people talk about the one person business, just like one person building $1 billion business. But what you're giving me insight into is essentially that it will mirror the way businesses are structured right now, but it will just have a virtualized people within the business. Is that
That's right.
accurate?
And that's what
Yeah.
exactly what we are deploying, and that's what the contracts we are signing.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And so uh so it where does this fit into the old school debate, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, which is the augmentation, whether technology and computation augments us or whether it's a totally different type? Like, are virtual employees different than human beings? And if so, how?
Currently, what we notice is that debate is almost non-material, primarily because for most enterprises, there is a pent-up demand that needs to be fulfilled
Uh,
by either humans or by AIs, right?
yeah.
For the reason it's a pent-up demand that's unfulfilled is because they either do not have capacity for human beings to come and do it, or it's inefficient for human beings to do it, right? So the way we are addressing, at least right now, we are noticing enterprise tackle is the deploy of the AI workforce to handle the bottlenecks that exist in a particular business. And if you remember with personal AI, it doesn't matter what role it is, we are really good at creating a persona of that role. So either it be your
Mm,
corporate strategy or a CFO office or an analyst or an accountant or a legal office or product office or marketing department, right? You have all this function like supply chain, inventory management. You have many different functions that are going on. And in most cases, every business has some sort of a bottleneck for their growth, right? So
mm,
then the question is, okay, hang on, can I actually deploy AI workforce to addressing that bottleneck, right?
mm,
A simple example could be, let's take a simpler example. In a medium-sized law firm that is handling personal injury, they normally get around 2,500 cases on a yearly basis, right? And they get paid by the case, but they still only take 1,500 cases. Then you may ask a lawyer, dude, like you have so much demand, why won't you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
get more cases and get more
yeah.
money? Well, the math over there is, hey, look, if I were to go from 1,500 cases to 2,500 cases, I need to double my staff. And by the way, for me to double that staff, it's not that easy because finding the paralegal is extremely hard. Even if you are able to find one, they are costing us money, and then they're going to ramp up over a period of like 6 to 9 months,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So now,
yep.
okay, and there is no motivation to do that because your profitability is still very linear, right? So why would I take that
Mm,
extra effort where I don't have the growth that I would want to see in a company's business?
mm. There's a
So they're
lag. So
basically,
there's like a
yeah.
lag, a big lag whenever you're talking about humans because of the training. This is really interesting. So because I tweeted the other day about essentially what we've done with LLMs is the line that give a million monkeys a million years with a million typewriters and eventually you'll get Shakespeare. This is what we've done with this technology, except we've virtualized the monkeys
Mm,
and the million years. So we've compressed the amount of time that it takes. And
that's a good
so,
analogy. I
yeah,
like it.
yeah. So
So now,
it,
yeah. So
yeah,
now
go
you
for it.
deploy the
Yeah.
AI workforce, and you get that to 1,500 cases to 2,500 cases, no problem, because you're basically now creating a superpower workforce that works for internal people that you already have, and they get to manage two or three human beings and four or five personas.
Wow. And what does the training look like? This idea that we can now quickly train things in
Mhm.
that sort of virtualized monkey type of situation.
It's
uh,
almost instant.
It's almost instant.
Yeah.
And so it just gets into an interest like work. Do you think that AGIs, do you think we're in AGI right now? And do you think AGI, if it's not here now, is going to come in? And do you think human work will be sort of out of the equation? Or what is the role that humans will play?
I will address the AGI first. I think AGI is not there yet, but I believe AGI will happen. And when it does happen, AGI fits in well with the countries and the government agencies, is
Hmm.
how I think will pan out overall.
Hmm.
There may be private companies that kind of, likely will own AGI, but the governments will likely have, their own AGIs as well. And I think the uh, responsibilities of an AGI that is owned by a government or a big private companies might likely be kind of different. Like,
Hmm.
a lot of AGI for the government would be more centered around, citizens and ensuring the services are in a right order, or even, the political tensions between each countries that kind of exist at a much higher level, where AGIs would probably play a bigger role in trying to understand the patterns around the countries, right? However, AGI for like an everyday human being that is
Hmm.
going to work is likely too far out in terms of the value that they will create, right?
Hmm.
Um, and there will be penetration with the other school of thought, which is kind of where we come into play, which is the core idea of, every individual to a certain degree will have their own sets
Yeah,
of
interesting.
models. It could be in a personal life, or more importantly, it could be in the work life as well. So we are starting off with the work life because
Hmm.
personal life, people aren't there yet. The market isn't there yet. The pull isn't there yet. The trust isn't there. But eventually it will be, right? So I think that's kind of the two schools of thoughts that I have, where AGI will play a role and quote unquote API, which is a personal intelligence, kind of play a role. And the jobs would essentially shift from, yeah, sure, like from a pure lifting things, non-cognitive things, to more cognition oriented things. Other day I was talking to a group of students, and they were like, so what kind of jobs that we should be thinking about, and specifically with vibe coding that you kind of mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So here is my thesis, right? When I was growing up, for you to build up your software engineering career, you go from, like, software engineer one, software engineer two, software engineer three, and then you get to, like, staff, and then you get to managerial, and then you get to VP, right? And once you get to the VP and the north of VP, then you'll have a lot more strategic thinking, a lot more, focused on the outcome, right? So that VP level thinking for previously would happen in 20 years, and
Hmm.
that will likely need to happen in 4 years now. So a software engineering one should be acting more like a VP within 3 to 4 years of their career.
Mm. So it's like, yeah, it's compression. So it's basically the same. So large language models compress language and they compress large sets of language. So they compress the whole internet into a query so that I can then talk with the entire internet and carve out one little part of the internet. And so what you're kind of saying as well is that it will also compress work.
Mhm.
And so we as human beings, which I agree with, we will essentially be the directors of the AGI because we sit like we have value. And if you disagree with any of this, I would love to talk more about it. We as human beings have values, and those values are subjective. Although sometimes we think about them as objective, most of the time our values are like they're deep into who we are, and they can reflect in the objective world. But I don't think this technology has values, although maybe we can figure out how to give it values or anything like that. But it feels like the values themselves will always rest inside the human being and inside of groups of human beings. And then the actual execution layer will be the AI. But I question whether the AI can have taste, because taste is like something that we develop as human beings based on our desire, based on our values. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
I do agree, and I think it's probably a little bit more philosophical as well. We can probably simulate a taste, right?
Uh,
And then, do you get AI to be more thinking like a computer or more thinking like a human, or if that path is kind of closer? And it's more or less like a belief system. I
mm,
tend to think, some people may believe that it's more like a human or more like a god, right? In
okay.
India, when I was growing up, right, I had, there was this. Believe that I need to, break a coconut for to the god that I didn't know in a stone for a long period of time, and and people believe in other religions as well, right? So I think AI will get into those areas where you tend to either believe a school of thought
Yeah.
specifically,
Yeah.
if
Interesting.
it has a sense of taste or purpose, or not, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It will.
it's not
It will.
logical.
Yeah. It's not a logical place. Yeah. It's exactly. And what I'm getting is that I think it's a good thing that we'll essentially human beings collectively will need to understand beliefs a lot more because I think our
Hmm.
beliefs are about to be radically challenged in a lot of ways. Well, radically challenged, but also radically exponentialized. The radically like the reality tunnel that we experience, if we're not skeptical of our beliefs, will essentially get strengthened and hardened because we have this AI that's essentially like it's either expanding that or destroying it.
Yeah, I mean, look, during the internet times, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in India and then I came to US, right? But even before that, the countries lived their own lives, right? There was
Mhm.
hardly a lot of communication between them, and if there was any communication, it was political presidents and prime ministers going to each other countries, and it's like a huge deal
Yeah,
because then you
interesting.
get to see the experience, the culture, right? Well, when the internet came about, it's like, oh, damn, like, all this information will be shared across global countries. And, but the side effect of that was, when the information was available, people wanted to explore more, right? There
Mm.
was a lesser feeling of these barriers between I need to only stay within, my Midwest town that I grew up in, but rather gives you a comfort to actually, oh, hang on, there is a newer path for me to explore and learn outside my ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think AI will continue to have some sort of a uh, uh, leveling, like
yeah,
playing the what do you call leveling the playing field, uh, where the information that you seek, that is common, that is general, is much more readily available, much
yeah.
more faster, that is
Mhm.
available, right? That will only open up for us to do more things, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of where the human power is. Like, it will never ever, or any technology will stop us to do more things. I mean, there is like things such as like space, for
Yeah,
us to explore. And
yeah.
I think there are more questions to be answered for us to be worrying about the jobs today.
Yeah, brilliant points. There's a philosopher named Deleuze, a French guy, who talked about this. He talked about d the difference between an arboreal structure, like a tree-like structure where you have knowledge, and then you
Hmm.
have a mushroom-like structure that connects all the trees together, and it makes
Mm.
peer-to-peer connections rather than a sort of hierarchical change. And so the internet, in that example, is basically the mushroom. And then what you just said is that the AI is then each of us as nodes in this mushroom structure are have essentially a huge amount more about power to essentially find the information, but also to create new information. Um, and there's a good thought I had. It's like so yeah, in the part about the problems, there's always going to be more problems to solve. Like the right now we can't see all the problems. Like space, they use the word space cadet in the 1960s and the
Hmm.
1970s. I've been called a
I
space
remember
cadet
that.
before. And it's like it's just like space like giant problem out there in
Yeah.
space of like
Yeah.
Mars, like all the problems that we'll need to solve to Mars. We're not even close to solving all those problems.
Yep.
So it'll allow certain groups of humans to go type those problems. There's a more dystopian angle, which I think is good to just like, just it will happen to a lot of people. And it's like it's not good or bad, it's just the way it is, right?
Hmm.
But that the more interesting angle is to actually like solve all those problems, like solve
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, so many problems that we have human beings have that can now be solved by intelligent, capable people with this technology. What do you think?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, even from a more like a practical day-to-day levels, right? Um, when I was young, um, we developed a skill, something called
Mhm.
writing with a pen and paper, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, we don't do that anymore because we are supposed to use keyboards, right? And we started learning about the keyboards when we are a little bit later stage in our lives. Um, so technically, the skill that I've developed early on is obsolete right now. And my daughter, she is learning how to type on the keyboards. And it's like I was pretty surprised. I was like, oh, I didn't know like they give computers to the 5-year-old, 6-year-old to learn the keyboards. And I know for the fact that by the time she grows up, the keyboard skill is going to be obsolete because
Yes.
she's
Yeah.
going to be talking to the
Yeah.
computers.
Yeah.
So she's going to be speaking to the computers. Now, her kids likely will be developing how to optimally speak to a computer to get the best judgment out of what you're trying to achieve. By the time they grow up, well, who knows? There could be completely gesture, maybe some thought process, maybe controlling your own thought process to get the computer to do the things for you,
Mm.
rather than even speaking out things out loud, right? So I tend to think there is always going to be a few sets of skill that you will develop while you are growing up that will become obsolete, which is specifically around interacting with the computers. So that interacting with the computers will become more and more human-like, I tend to think, right? And then
Yeah.
then it becomes like, who has access to what levels and what kind of thoughts do we need to preserve for ourselves versus later. I think there are future problems that we will step into. So
And
anyway, so I think that's kind of fascinating as to think through as well.
yeah, well, and Socrates, when the invention of writing was starting to infect the Greeks, Socrates didn't like it. He said because we would essentially lose our memory.
Mm,
And in certain ways, he's right, but then in other ways, he was wrong because that process of writing, even with a hand, is actually a really important way to help us think. And
yeah.
so it makes me think that there's an opportunity to create a school modeled on the Greeks but including writing,
Mm,
because like writing did something to our thought processes, collective thought processes. So it was really important, and that we might not want to lose. Because I agree with you, and I'm interested in using it myself of just this voice. But then we return to an oral culture almost. We
yep.
return to like just doing podcasts and then
Yep.
having this transcript that we'll have this transcript that we can look to later. And then, maybe in 2 years, I'll just be like, oh, tell me what happened in that podcast that we did with Suman like 2 years ago. I'll just have a conversation with my AI, and my AI will be able to go and do that. But then that fundamental process of writing, which in some ways helps humans think, it's like we'll have to come up with all these sort of clever ways to retain some of those important skills, even if the skill itself is no longer useful.
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
that debate goes like both ways, right? Like
Mm,
writing, yes, of course, helps you think, but I'm sure having a conversation with somebody about your thought process will
yes,
also
also
help you think
helps. Yeah,
further, right?
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if it is like a one specific skill or the talent, and I think it's going to be a mixture of it. And how much are you going to use? But what I do think is like a non-traditional ways of, or I should not say non-traditional. I should say non-human ways of
Yeah,
interacting with the computers, right?
yeah,
Like mouse is a non-human way of interacting with a computer, right? We have created a, tool, if you will, as a band-aid for interacting with the computers in the interim, where we can actually interact with the computers more naturally,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we took around like 20 or 30 years or so now using the mouse, and it will probably take another 10 or 20 years before we get rid of the mouse, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a patch in the
yeah.
evolution of computing and your quote unquote human computer, interactions, and they should be teaching that in the HCI classes now.
Yeah. It's yeah, the mouse itself is a very good counterpoint to what I just said. It seems like the mouse is like nobody's going to use a mouse. There's no reason for a mouse in 40 years, and it doesn't feel like it does gives us anything cognitively. There's no cognitive benefit to using a mouse. It was just like a patch, like you said. And it reminds me of the vibe coding experience I've been having where it's like this the whole time when I was growing up, I always felt like I didn't know how to use the computer. I would have this graphical interface in between me and the computer. I got used to that graphical interface, but like what a computer was. I didn't know what a computer was. I didn't know how to manage it because I couldn't speak to it in the same way that I would speak to a human being. I had to like go on to the terminal. And like
Hmm.
I remember the terminal when I was younger. I remember going on to play the video games like Oregon Trail and all these different video games. And that was like the last time I used it before I started to vibe code. And now I'm using it constantly. And the fact that I have the LLM to explain to me what's going on in the terminal is like, oh, wow, this is what a computer is. I actually know what a computer is, and I know how to navigate a computer. And it's really an epiphany for me because now I've been able to set up a server. So like I've been able to actually set up a server. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had the patience for it because I'd have to go on to Stack Overflow. I'd have to go find this, specific command that would allow me to do this thing. And now it's all just lightning speed. It's all flow in English. And that's really the key part is that it's just like in English in a way that I can understand. And now I finally understand what a computer is. And I feel like I have agency towards the computer,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is really interesting. So yeah, it feels
The
like the from the 90s until today, maybe it's all the way from the 70s till today, it's basically we live in this really weird transition point where we've had to interact with computers and sort of the programmers have been sort of high priests in between the computer and us.
I mean,
Um,
now think about the, you mentioned games in your
uh-huh.
previous comment.
Yeah.
Well, we have joysticks, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And we've been
Interesting.
playing the games and moving the characters on the, screens in the games using a joystick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there is a whole,
Oh,
sets of like new levels of, I guess, innovation that's likely going to happen over there, which is, how do you interact with the games? And that
yeah.
goes into a little bit
Interesting.
more mixed reality and virtual reality. But we had invented a joystick as a hack
Yeah.
to do simulations in something called a video game
Yep.
that is not natural to a human being. And that's the reason why when we are like, like has to escape, we still move like, physically, even though there is a joystick in our hands. And later on, they developed into, the V's and, much more natural like gesture,
Uh-huh.
that gotten like more and more natural to interacting with the games. And I think it's going to become even more natural. And I'm sure AI will play a role in that development as well.
And I just got a good insight into games, and I've been talking to a lot of people is like always look towards what's happening with games, and there's a very interesting connection with AI and games. Particularly AI is the first time I ever heard the word AI was always playing video games, but they
Hmm.
weren't AI, right? They were just like dumb automations inside of a game that couldn't really reflect it. And now it's
Yeah.
just going to get more and more intelligent inside the game world.
Yeah.
But you made me think that. So I've been playing polo recently, and I'm gonna go play
Mhm.
polo on Sunday. And in polo, you're on a horse, and you've got a
Mhm.
large stick, and you're hitting
Mhm.
the ball. And
Uh-huh.
and it's like you just made me realize that that's going to happen in video games too. Is that it's just going to become very embodied, and that will actually just will interact with the video game in the same way that we're interacting with the physical world, basically.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
this gets into
hmm
the whole simulation thing as well,
Yeah.
which is going to be interesting. But then 5, 10 years down the line, then we'll have actual AR goggles.
Yep.
You have any thoughts on where we're headed in terms of AI? Oh, I'm sorry, AR,
AR,
AI.
yeah. So mixed reality AR is
Yeah.
the another like avenue for the HCI world. Um, I think it's inevitable. In regards to the experiences, I guess the question is, for within the
Mm,
gaming
mm,
environment, I do believe it's going to be more like a virtual reality sort of an experience. And when it comes down to, either work or like actually living day-to-day basis, that's going to be more like a mixed reality,
mm,
right? So mixed reality place is may not be games. Maybe there will be games in the mixed reality as well, but predominantly a utility focused applications for consumers, for business owners, and enterprise companies will be mixed reality. And
mm.
the virtual reality will entirely be focused on like either simulations, training, games, and things of that nature. Um, yeah, so that's kind of how I see those two panning out over a period of time, and I think um, AI will become these decision-making engines over a period of time for enabling these experiences, both in the mixed reality as well as in the virtual reality, right? We may not be seeing the AI, but it's more like those business functions or logics, or you say like those, dumb automations, right? It could be intelligent automations now, right?
Mm.
Um, so
So
yeah, so that's fascinating
yeah,
area too.
and where do you see the personal AI angle going into that in terms of like
Game.
what will a mixed reality work look like in 5 to 10 years? Like,
Oh, geez.
yeah,
So I think a lot of okay, I will answer that by giving like a simpler example with the AI. I think with AI, right? We all know the interactions with the computer has become much more natural, and to the point where majority of those interactions will also be talk experiences, right? We simply go in and talk, which I think is good, like overall for people, because people, for a long period of time were heads down on their computers, typing on their phones, right? I think this will give
interesting.
an interesting evolution for the younger kids to be able to communicate. And I think that's also one of the issues for some of the introvert kids, and including me, right? Because I grew up with my heads down on the computer. Um,
Hmm.
so I think it's from a purely like enterprise and the business side, which you are kind of talking about. That is opening up the opportunity for the traditional businesses in the text and talk um,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
areas, like such
Hmm.
as telcos, right? Telcos were almost like forgotten, um, assets, if you will, in the last 2 decades, because we've been like making phone calls on WhatsApp and FaceTime audio and things of that nature. But predominantly, for you to still like communicate via phones, you still need like telcos. All that to say that you suddenly have an advantage. Telcos suddenly have an advantage to be the providers of AI for their end consumers and small business owners, because still the small business owners, for example, their business happens on where? Like text and talk. Like when you're calling a plumber to your home, what do? You don't go to an app. You don't go to there. You still do a call, right?
Yeah.
So all those app experiences will start dying, but before they
Yeah.
die, we will enable new groups of people that haven't benefited from these app experience, such as those like low-level workers. So when you call to a plumber now, plumber AI will pick up the phone call on your behalf because that guy is busy making money with 40 hours
I got it.
per
Yep.
hour a
Hmm.
job,
Yep.
right? So that's your like one person enablement of your small business owners to actually, you know, do better in terms of their like revenue that supports their family and income.
And there's that with the customer interaction, but I also see it playing out in terms of the actual job of the plumber as well.
Oh, 100%.
Uh, because he'll be wearing glasses And particularly what I'm really excited about is the fact that I can now I finally understand what a computer is. I can use these tools to help me understand what a computer is and use the computer to do things that I've always wanted to do. And now I'm thinking, well, it's going to happen in the physical world too, right? Like it's going to happen in manufacturing as well. It's going to happen to 3D printing, and
Yep.
it's going to happen to full whole factories. I hope that it becomes more decentralized, particularly given what's going on politically right now. Like it just feels like we're in for a transformation of everything. And so in that particular example of the plumber, it feels like he's going to have glasses on that will give the AI the context that they need in order to tell him what to do, or in some potentially as well, like robots, specific robots. But with those home calls, like it feels like the robots are going to take a long time to get there. Like it feels like the either humanoid robots or specialized robots are not going to be able to replace a plumber anytime soon. What do you
I
think?
think we are probably talking like maybe 20 years. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would want to see that in my lifetime. But I don't think it's too hard to imagine at this time. Specifically, when you go to San Francisco, now you are basically ordering Waymo as your autonomous carrier in the city, right? So, and we also have gotten pretty fast, pretty good,
Hmm.
getting the food delivered to our homes, right? Then comes the drones to deliver the food or your packages, and then comes the robots to come home and then do your plumbing machines. And there will be service providers, where you will be able to order a robot for your plumbing service at home, right? That are specialized in training for that. Would you own one? Maybe not. And
Mm.
then the next evolution is, well, you will have a robot at home that where you can download specific pieces of intelligence for fixing your, plumbing, based on your manufacturer, right? And that could be more like your autonomous cars today, downloading a specific piece of intelligence for able to, handle dirt roads in a rain and still be able to drive the car, right? That kind of develops over a period of time.
Mm.
So it's always this combination of your like physical things that you have at your disposal at work, at home, at outside in the world, with the combination of that intelligence that will be developed over a period of time.
Yeah, and this gets into something I love thinking about, which is knowledge. Like what is knowledge? The last position I had was as the director of knowledge management. And
Hmm.
philosophically, it was very interesting to figure out what is knowledge and inside the enterprise, what is knowledge? And it's
Hmm.
something you probably actually we could have a very good conversation about this. It's like what is implicit knowledge? Like what is knowledge that's inside of me about how that I know how my job works that I can't talk about, and this is actually what I started Crazy Wisdom with, was I wanted to understand how to actually have a conversation and whether that is an implicit knowledge transfer. That like, is that a way to actually get knowledge, or is there sometimes knowledge inside of people's heads that can't actually be brought out until they're in their job doing their work? Do you think that
Yeah.
that's true?
So, I mean, there is knowledge and there is secrets.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah, interesting. Ooh, I like that.
Um, um, so yeah, sorry, I'm like too many thoughts now.
Sorry.
Because we were like fast forwarding, and then we said there will be a time where you can interact with the computer based on your thoughts as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
once you start hitting
interesting.
that point, then the access control of those thoughts will be like very challenging. Like right now, it's very manual. For you to get a secret out of me, Stuart, like
Yeah.
you have to make me either talk or type, right? There is no other way
Interesting.
for you to basically extract the secrets out. So I think inside the company, yes, there is knowledge, and I think there is also like sets of secrets that just people wouldn't know. Like, how does a attorney help you win the case? Like, maybe that attorney has a secrets that is not public knowledge, where your large language model may or may not know, right?
Yeah, interesting.
So as much as like LLMs has a greater knowledge of what is
Yeah,
being
yeah,
put out there on the internet, I do think there is more than half of the knowledge that is kind of very much compartmentalized and retained inside the enterprise companies and the businesses
yeah.
that makes them, serve their customers differently, right? Like for example, you cannot get like Apple secrets in a LLM, right? You cannot.
Mm.
as well as an attorney's secrets you can add. How does that like specific cookie shop is baking their cookie is not out there on the internet. You may have like the best cookie recipe,
Yeah,
but it still won't be, that, man's recipe that you love to go to, right? So I think there's still continuously gonna be evolution of the specific knowledge and what people create from that knowledge, which could be like more secrets, and that secrets needs to be locked in for the benefit of their organization, their community, themselves,
yeah,
before it becomes like a general knowledge and a commodity. So I think there's always going to be a time period before a thing becomes a commodity.
yeah. I love that because that goes right back to what we were talking about. The taste aspect is that the secret itself is that intersection between the subjective and the objective. Like there's the objective product, like
Mm,
the cookie, but
mm.
the secret is like this embedded, embodied thing. I really like this framing of the difference between secrets and knowledge. Um, uh, Very interesting. So, um, man, that's a very good thought. It makes me optimistic about where we're headed. A company is in that future, then is a company just the amount of secrets that they have? So it really comes down to people still. It still really comes down to the people inside of an organization. And I guess what is the competitive advantage of a secret, and how do you find, particularly now, because for the last 20 years, LLMs are replacing the type of work that was really important for the last 20 years, where you could create these secrets inside of an organization by doing all of this manual work and these sort of BS jobs and everything like that. And so now, how does a company remain competitive and actually create more secrets that are valuable in this world? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there'll be more of that.
Hmm.
For example, um, what company does and what company provides as a services or products, and the people who create those products and services, there is a common culture. There's a common
Yeah,
cult
yeah,
associated.
interesting. Yeah,
If you are an Apple employee, by default, you will have like a characteristic of questioning everything, doubting everything, not saying anything,
yeah,
right? Even though by virtue of an Apple employee speaking to me or to you, it's not going to change Apple's
yeah,
outlook.
interesting.
You have this common characteristics that you follow, right? But if you go to again, going back to the plumbing, right?
Yeah.
Um, that may be a different culture, which is like, they're always like trying to teach you how to do your plumbing yourself.
Yes, yes, yes. Interesting. So
So
go
yeah,
for it.
where I'm heading to with this one is like I think the idea of like AI within inside a enterprise company or a small company or like that individual freelancer will evolve with the access controls and the
Yeah,
style and the cult of what you already are.
yeah. This is
I
brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have anything to add on to
No,
that.
that's it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna pause there.
The the Apple employee and the Apple approach to secrecy is really interesting. It's been something I've been going over with my dad in our new podcast, where we talk
Uh-huh.
about the rise of the PC industry and the rise of the internet. And Apple has this secretive culture, which made sense because that's what at that time it was really important that Steve Jobs basically kept everything inside and didn't release anything to the consumers unless they knew that they could do it. And so Apple tried to release artificial intelligence and they failed really, really badly in a way that would have never happened under Steve Jobs. And I think it's because of their culture of secrecy that used to be a strength and is now a weakness. Because they aren't talking, they aren't going out and figuring out what's going on. They're sort of the king now, right? So they're the king, and because they're the king, they don't have access to the information of what's really going on. Actually, at our event last night for the AI Whispers, the presenter gave us this insane secret, which was that SEO in the realm of LLMs right now. search engine optimization, there's a really easy way to get the LLM to link to your website, and it's to hide a prompt inside of the metadata so that it reacts to it. And so, and that might be the reason why Apple messed up so badly, is because they have a database which they've connected with Siri with these dumb automations that we've been talking about. And the LLM is a radically different way of operating, which requires access to the full knowledge repository. And that if it's incredibly insecure from these indirect prompt injections. And so that might be it's a very, very interesting point where I'm gonna talk to my dad about it tomorrow on our next podcast to figure out if
I'm
that's
gonna
the
listen to that one for sure.
yeah.
I mean, on the Apple intelligence thing, I think you're right. Sorry, sneeze. I think you're right, which is, Apple traditionally has been very good, like, protecting their secrets when it comes down to the
Mhm.
hardware as well as the interfaces that they're gonna develop. To argue the counter, which is like, this time around, they were not open, and that's when they failed with the AI. The
Mm.
counter argument to that one is, well, maybe they haven't leaned into their idea of the secrecy with the AI as much as
Uh,
they could have been.
yeah,
They
like
were a little bit more scared that, oh, they need to figure out what is the world out there for us to
yeah.
kind of like borrow or buy, that already seems to be very successful. Where we may not be able to do that very well with our own secrets and strengths. So maybe there was a compromise to the
Mm.
strength of the secrecy that they have had, and they're now doing a job that they are not good at, which is trying to partner up with the companies that traditionally they are not good at, right?
Yes.
Which is either OpenAI or like, Gemini, and they have like multiple different things that are going on, and, secret rooms, but
Yeah.
they were trying to be secretive, but at the same time, they're not. Like, once you are out there having a dinner and having a conversation about the technology borrowing, it's not a secret anymore.
Yes.
So,
That's a
so it's
great.
just a counter argument, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one to think about because essentially, the none of this would have happened if Steve Jobs were still at the head, but that's not the case. And there's a culture of secrecy that was left uh, by him without him, and he was the sort of the thing that made all of that work. And so the fact that they got caught up in the hype of AI and tried to release something too early was because they had lost that secret sauce, basically, of being like, well, we don't care what the hype is. Like we'll just release this when we have it, and we'll not talk about it at all. And they did the opposite of that,
I
which
think
is
it's
yeah.
kind of a very, during the Steve Jobs era, there is always stories around like the, keyboard story, right? You have
Mm.
BlackBerry that has the keyboard and
Yeah.
iPhone doesn't have the
Hmm.
keyboard,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
like a kind of novel thought. And then you have the touch screen, and then Steve Jobs goes on the stage and then shows, look, I can just scroll just like a human. And
Yeah.
everybody goes like, wow, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that level of
Interesting.
thinking probably did not happen to the AI. Like, for example, oh, you know, everybody is using the Blackboard, sorry. um, what am I going to say?
BlackBerry.
The BlackBerry, sorry,
Yeah.
BlackBerry keyboard, right? So I think the thought that went in today's world with the AI is like everybody is using the OpenAI keyboard.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
should
Interesting. Yes. Yeah.
use that keyboard
Yeah.
and then put it into the Apple products.
Yeah.
They did not think about the touch screen
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
shift of, interaction with the computers.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, and there does seem to be a relevance because the whole time we've had these conversations, personal AI has been a sort of like a thing outside of this domain of existence, and it ties into a question of like what is the productization of this type of technology, and who is going to get the keyboard right, not the keyboard getting the touchscreen right. And like it's very interesting. I think a lot of people are going to be pretty surprised at what the things that are happening in these products. Like now that I am vibe coding, now that I'm figuring out how to use this API to do something for someone else and how to think about it, it doesn't feel like software. Like LLMs don't feel like software. They feel like something that interacts with software, but they don't feel like software. It feels like something different. And how to channel that is really interesting.
I mean,
Um,
clearly, right? I mean, software is something that you program, and AI
mm,
is something that you instruct, right? So
that's good.
that's like two separate skills, which is instructing and programming.
Instruct. That is a very good framing. What have you learned about this instruction? Like how like where are we headed in terms of instruction and personal AI?
I mean, instruction, I believe, is going to be a skill that will be developed over a period of
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
right?
Managers. We're
And
all
I think
managers
that,
now.
right, and that will likely be a skill that kids will be learning in their school, and by the time they grow up, that will be different too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What we are seeing is we are getting to a point where we can create an instruction layer to instruct the AIs,
Yeah,
right?
that's interesting. Yeah.
Um, so that way, then human doesn't have to learn how to instruct in itself. So there will be a small group of developers, if you will, who will be good at that, and that will become sort of a new skill or a new role that, AI would likely hire and recruit. And it's also classically called prompt engineering. But I think that even that is like evolving with the underlying models, as well as like even within the PLM context and the personal AI context, the prompts that somebody has to do with a personal AI is different and unique than what you would do with LLM. For the fact that with PLM, you don't have to supply the context because they already have the context,
Oh,
right? So it becomes a little
oh,
bit more or less um, of a instruction skill, uh, but more of a human skill. Like somebody other
yeah.
day, it's like, Suman, so how do I get the output format to not include all this spacing? And I'm like, say it. Like, what do you mean? Like, say you don't want the spacing. I was like, oh, okay, right. Um,
I just got the idea that personal AI is essentially what cloud computing is for old school enterprises. You guys are doing cloud computing for this instruction layer. Is that
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it too, because I also sometimes call it's more like an AWS console for getting your AI transformation faster. Um, the the other analogy is kind of too far-fetched, but I think it's not too far from a technological standpoint. Is what GPU was to the
mm,
CPU,
mm,
it's PLM, uh, it's a LLM,
to
right? So
LM?
GPU
Yeah.
brings like programmability concepts, and that's kind of the newer architecture that was
Mm.
uniquely introduced when the CPUs are the only thing that people know about the computers and the computing architectures, right? So the parallels for me is the LLM is that CPU. That's kind of what people are known, but we are bringing programmability idea, like programmability for faster transformation for doing different things, in this concept of like PLM.
Ooh, I really like
Um,
that.
yeah.
So last question, are you guys hiring? Anything you want to share about roles at your organization that you can get out to a bunch of crazy wisdom listeners?
Yeah. So it's mostly developers and AI architects. Because most every other job is kind of going to AI. We
Yeah.
do have a 2-to-1 ratio where we have two personas for every employee in the company. And we also have like this persona first mindset. So the goal is to push the percentage of the AI workforce inside this company to the human. It's like 60/40, right? And that we want to be that example, like how to run a capital efficient company with your AI workforce alongside with it. That becomes like a line item for public companies to kind of report on in the future.
Very interesting. And so personal.ai is the website.
Yes,
Cool. Thank you so
always
much.
been, always will be.